What are the strangest true crime cases you've come across? When I was 10, my family moved to the most perfect stretch of the California coastline. For all its charms, there was something very dark lurking right below the surface. There are two major cases that stand out to me. The first one happened in '94, making national headlines and even Dateline. The boys had gotten a young girl to leave their home in the middle of the night and took her life. For 8 long months the girl's parents held out hope that their daughter, whom I had shared first period PE with, was still alive. That may have gone on indefinitely if not for Roy, one of the young Kadlers, finding religion and confessing. Police found the body exactly where he said it would be, in a shallow grave less than a mile from the house where her poor, devastated parents had held vigil for the last 8 months. The makeshift grave showed evidence of being tampered with, possibly multiple times, but it was almost a year later, amidst a flurry of rumors and half-truths, that we learned why. It was during allocation that the whole, horrifying story came out. When it finally did, it quickly became apparent that the darkest rumors, the ones that hardly anyone took seriously, were, in fact, the truth. They had planned the unalive months in advance, choosing their girl carefully as she was to be given Satan, given to the guy down below, whom they claimed to worship, in return for musical talent that would make their band an overnight success. They chose her because of her blonde hair, blue eyes and the fact that she had her V card. While I'm sure that taking 5+ grams of mushrooms every day and listening to death metal played some part in putting these budding psychopaths in just the right mood, they obviously had some serious issues to begin with. Apparently the Supreme Court agreed with that since her parents' lawsuit was eventually denied. The world was further stunned by the boys' admittance that, during the 8 months that our town was desperately searching for her, they managed to reach even higher levels of depravity by revisiting her and taking turns having intimacy with her, even as late as 6 months after, hence the disturbed grave. What are the strangest true crime cases you've come across? The second crime took place years later while I was living out of state, but since I personally knew the person and my mother was first on the scene, it definitely affected me, perhaps even more deeply than the first incident. I had known the guy to see most of my life. He ran the restaurant that was directly across from our house, and the image of him, standing outside the restaurant having a smoke, was one I saw almost every day between the ages of 10 and 17 when I moved out. When I returned to town years later after my divorce, I actually began having conversations with him. Whenever I would attend the local pool hall, he would always buy me a drink. We would chat for a moment about the weather, and he would tip his hat and leave. He was Japanese and quite a bit older than me, but his old school manners reminded me of my dad. He never failed to put a smile on my face, and I began to look forward to our brief encounters, which spanned over the next several years. My mother does housekeeping for a handful of people, with this guy on that list. By the time this tragedy took place, I was out of town again, and my mother chose not to tell me until I got back, but the time did nothing to dull the shock. Apparently she showed up at her usual time to clean, and immediately felt that something was just not right. First of all, the front door was unlocked, and as soon as she walked inside she saw that the glass coffee table was shattered and he was nowhere to be found. Trusting her instincts, as soon as she was certain that he wasn't inside and in need of urgent help, she fled the apartment and called the police. What came next was an investigation lasting several days. The whole town was on edge as certain facts came to light. Apparently, being the kind soul that he was, he had opened his home to a young woman who had shown up in town alone with 2 small children. They had been staying there for several days when the woman's ex was released from prison. I don't recall what led the police to their gruesome discovery, but it turned out that he had been unalived and placed in multiple public trash cans in the next town over. They caught the man responsible, and my mother testified against him in court, which she told me was extremely unnerving. Unfortunately, in this life certain people mistake kindness for weakness, or worse, and my only solace is in knowing that the monster who unalived and discarded him like pieces of garbage will never again be a free man.